Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Tom S. Good morning, everybody. I'm Tom. I'm a grateful alcoholic. And I'm not Danny. And this must be the group that was not informed that he couldn't make it. So I love H&I. I got involved with it when I was new in sobriety also, and it's really changed my life, I can tell you that. And there's a line in the book where it says that nothing will ensure immunity against drinking than constant work with others. And if the triangle of Alcoholics Anonymous talks about unity, service, and recovery, and it mentions unity, of course, being the fellowship here. And to me, service takes on many different forms, whether it be through central office, GSR, GSO stuff. But to me, the service part that I found my niche in was the H&I, going out there and talking to the new guys. And that's been one of my passions in Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I was brand new, I didn't think I had the message. I didn't know what the message was. But I knew where I didn't have the message, but I knew where it was. So what I would do is I'd go to these detoxes and halfway houses and drag them over to the good meetings. We all know where the good meetings are. You know, it'd be over here, you know, where the people were there and they were carrying a good message. It was fun, it was excitement, and there was enthusiasm in the meeting. And it wasn't in that one where you have the 5 guys like going up to Tehachapi, local town meeting there, where you have 10 guys sitting around in a circle. I've been sober for 30 years and I've never been so excited. If you want what I got. And you're like, whoa. But I used to take people to what I thought were good meetings. And it really didn't matter. And the gentleman here was just talking about, he ended up going to lots of meetings and lots of meetings. He was going to do the H&I work. And it's like me, I did that Warm Springs panel for 7 years, waiting for it to work. Who was I going to help out of there? And it dawned on me, I just racked up another 7 years, and that's how that thing works. It's really kind of special. I was going to start off and say something, but Ron's not here. I was going to tell him, I was going to skip that drunk-a-log part and what it was like and go right into recovery here. And he put a stop to that real quick, threw off my game plan. But I only have one story. So I basically have to tell my story. I will elaborate a little more about some of the H&I stuff that I had in it, and it's good to see a lot of friends here. I would like to have somebody stand by if you're paramedics or whatever, because last time I spoke and Scotty was in the room, he ended up in the hospital for about 3 weeks and had to go back for a couple more operations. So I can tend to make people sick. And and it's great to see him here. We're kindred spirits on this. The book talks about that you surely meet some of us as you trudge that happy road. And it's really good to see a lot of familiar faces here, And they're the ones that I've recognized over the years. And it's like, we're not in contact on a daily basis, but they know, and we are one, And that's the unity part of this thing, It's really special. And I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't plan on growing up to be an alcoholic. I was just a young kid in high school, whatever, and I got invited to this upper class party, and it was the first time I was going to go drinking. I remember I'd had drinks before. I drank at my house, when my folks said, New Year's or Christmas or some wedding or something, we'd sneak a beer here or there or run around the end of a party and have a few drinks. But this was the night I was going to go drinking. And I was all excited about it, and I got invited by these upperclassmen, and so we go to this kegger party. It was a typical high school party. I had the keg in the center of the room, the guys were on the wall on the right, the girls were on the wall on the left, and I floated over and got my beer, went back to my wall, down my beer. Went back to the keg, went back to my wall. By the third beer, I was the bartender. And I was pouring one for you and one for me. And I absolutely loved the feeling produced by alcohol. I don't know about you, but growing up I had tons of fears. I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of talking to the girls. I was afraid of those big, tough football players. I was afraid of the gangs, and we didn't even have them then. You know, I might have read about it or something. We didn't have it. I mean, our biggest thing in high school was somebody 4 schools over got knifed in the afternoon thing, and that was a big controversy that day, you know. And so we didn't have those kind of problems. But I got to tell you, I was afraid. You know, and all of a sudden, you know, after that 3rd beer, I wasn't afraid of nothing. You know, I was talking to the girls. I was running around chasing, kissing on them, and the big tough guys are my best friends now. And you know, it was unbelievable, the magic that happened that night. And I was to do that night everything I was going to do in the next 15 years of my drinking. I fell down, I threw up, and I was thrown out. Then I got to practice throwing up on the way home, and you know, it was like, my God. And the next morning I woke up and I had to go to swim workout. My head was just exploding, and it was just pounding, and I'm having to do the laps in the pool, and I got like 2 lines in my lane, and we're doing them flip turns and just kept rolling, and I'm just like, God, get me out of this, and I will never do this again, you know. And sure enough, I made it through the workout. We hit the lockers, got changed, we was about ready to head out, and a couple guys come running up to me, and they said, Tom, we saw you at that party last night. You were so funny. We're going to another party now. You want to come? I said, sure. Just like that. And I was off to the races. Now, I don't know when I crossed that magic line. I truly believe alcohol is something you have or you don't have. And if you don't have it, you can't drink enough to be one. I mean, yeah, sure, you can drink yourself into physical ailments and whatever else. And the book talks about that guy, given a sufficient reason, wife, job, family, some other moral principle or something. You stop and turn around and drink normally. I mean, I talk to guys like, oh, yeah, I quit drinking a long time ago, but, you know, I have a beer once in a while. That's disgusting. You know, that pisses me. You know, to me, you know, I remember getting into Alcoholics Anonymous and being brand new and just in that pathetic, poor me. I'll never drink again like other people. And, oh, my God, why am I an alcoholic? Poor me. I mean, why am I the alcoholic and stuff? And then it dawned on me, you know, somebody finally told me what normal people drink like. And it was like, who would want to do that? You know? They have 1 or 2 drinks in a sitting, no more than 14 in a week, you know. They will save them up and have them on Friday. You know, it's like... They have 2 or 3 drinks, and they're like my brother and sister. I remember getting sober, and I was at a Thanksgiving dinner, and, you know, they had 2 bottles for 8 people. They weren't even the Magnums. They were the little fists. Halfway through dinner, nobody's finished the first glass, and I'm getting real nervous, and I grab the bottle, and I look at my sister and said, would you like a little more? She said, no, thanks, I'm starting to feel it. That's the point. You know, and I don't know about you. They say, well, I don't like that sense of losing control. I said, my God, if you're like me, it's the only time I ever felt in control of my life. And after that night, you know, I had a lot of other things, and I don't know if it's addictive personality or whatever else. I don't think it's really even relevant. But, you know, I was so focused into what I was doing, my career at that time in sports, that I just quit drinking for the entire year while I was 18 years old. I was in training, and I was going to accomplish this goal and all this stuff. And as soon as I finished that event and whatever else, I went out, and I thought it was pretty cool because this is the first time in a long time that 3 beers got me drunk. You know, I remember that I didn't exactly know what happened, but alcohol did something for me and to me that it didn't do for other people. It just took that. I like to say, you guys have that rave. It'd be like turning off that K-crap radio that's blaring in my head and it turning on the wave. You know, and everything became okay when I drank. You know, I went on to school. I went on to college, and I went up to USC from junior college, transferred up there, and I think this is one of the first signs of alcoholism. I don't know if it is or not, but one of the things that happened to me is all of a sudden I got invited to this fraternity parties and stuff and the rush parties, and I was doing that on the road down there at USC, and I found the one thing is I had this immense capacity to consume lots of booze. You know, I could outdrink all my friends. I had this hollow leg they talked about, you know, and I was getting in these chugging contests for the front line of the USC football team at that time. And back then, folks, I'm not the guy here. I was 155 pounds soaking wet. And, you know, and I'm drinking against guys that are weighing 240 and 6'4" and all this stuff. And I could outdrink them all, you know. And I'd go in from one contest down to the next. And I got a lot of immediate gratification. And I know one thing else that happens to me. When I was in high school and stuff, I had a lot of ambitions and a lot of goals and desires. And when I got into college, you know, I started doing a little more partying and stuff, and those goals and aspirations and stuff and those sporting event things started declining, and that immediate gratification of booze was really starting on the increase. because all of a sudden I could have that instant gratification of reward, and people would pat me on the back, and you're the center of attention and stuff. So you got that immediate gratification, didn't have to work for it. Just a couple more beers and boom, you're on it. You know, in sports and stuff, you have to do all this training and all this stuff, and then finally the big event comes, and it's either a win-loss thing, you know. You got a great day or a bad day, you know. And here, booze was working for me all the time. It was wonderful. And it also takes your attitude. You know, they talk about the root of the problem being selfishness, self-centeredness. All of a sudden, I realized that, you know, I was getting a little more cocky, self-assured, and a few other things. And I was in my senior year with less than 4 classes to go. I think I had 6 classes to go. I had to repeat one. And I walked into that class and opened up that door and saw the professor I'd had the semester before. I didn't like this guy then, and I didn't like him in the moment. And I shut that door, and I turned around and walked away from college with less than 6 classes to graduate. And I just remember thinking about it, you know, I don't have to put up with that kind of shit. And I was thinking I was a little more smarter, unique, and different than the rest of them. And my dad was pissed. He'd been paying for my school and a few other things, and he was very, very upset at that. And you know, that's just my alcoholism, I think, was progressing at that point, and it had just taken that away from me. And I remember people were running around where they were saying, you know, hey, Tom, see the world, join the Navy. And I'm going, not. Locked up on a boat with a bunch of guys? I don't think so. And I'm going, you know, a couple of gals I was dating said, well, Tom, why don't you join the airlines and be a flight attendant? You would have a lot of fun. A lot of fun? And they said, a lot of fun. And folks, this is back in the good old days. This is back when sex was safe and marijuana and cocaine were not habit forming. And this was the disco days, and you're looking at one of the original disco ducks. This was Donna Summers, the Bee Gees, Last Chance for Romance. And I was getting paid to hop on a plane and fly around the world. I would get on there and I'd start serving cocktails, a few meals and whatever else, and jump off the plane in these different cities and dance the night away. And it was wonderful, and it was magical, and it was all working then. And alcohol was just really in the spirit of things. And it worked, and it was a magical time. Now, you'll hear people run around Alcoholics Anonymous and say stuff like this. I'm sober now, and my worst day drinking was never as good as my worst day sober is never as good as my best day drinking. Well, they never drank with me, you know, because my best days drinking were a lot of fun. But the quote should be read and said is this: I would not trade my worst day sober today for my best day drinking. See, I like what I got right now. I loved what I had back then, but I really love what I got now. And see, what happened is alcohol changed. See, I got something that's called alcoholism, which is progressive and terminal in nature, unbeknownst to me. And like I said in the beginning, I was running around having a lot of great times, and it was dancing the night away. And all of a sudden, I started drinking some more and more, and all of a sudden, I started hitting a few problems. You know, like I mentioned, that first night I was out drinking, I fell down, I threw up over that guy's carpet, and it was thrown out. You know, it was pretty funny. You're 16 years old, 15 years old, that kind of stuff, and it's kind of cute and funny. Now that you're 24 years old, you go over to some friend's house, you fall down, you throw up all over the brand new white carpet. It ain't funny. They're still telling the same joke, but, you know, they're not laughing no more. And you start overshooting the mark at time. You start getting those moments of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. I never knew that in my vocabulary before it came to alcoholics, but I'd felt it for years. When they read those words, I knew it rung home to me. I knew what they were talking about. And, you know, and the thing is I worked in the airlines. Like I said, I'm pouring coffee, serving meals and stuff. And airline industry is a little bit different than today. Today I'm in construction, and I work in that. And back then, you know, I'd show up to work and whatever, and all of a sudden you overshoot the mark, and you'd start running into work. And, you know, if you're, like, for example, if I overshoot the mark, if I go out and get drunk tomorrow and whatever, and I go drink till 3, 4 in the morning, and I come running into work, and I oversleep, and I run in late, you know, I'm going to get yelled at by the bosses and this, that, and the other, and they're going to say go to work or go home or do something, but, you know, you're making it through the day and whatever. And then the airlines, you know, you go out drinking all night long, you come back out, you're dancing the night away, you show up the next morning and you overslept and you run down there to work late, your job is gone. They ain't waiting for you. And then you got to do a bunch of explaining and stuff, and you get stuck in wonderful places like Dayton, and you got to get out of there, you know. And I don't know, but all of a sudden, you know, so you start working your schedules and manipulating things, and alcohol and alcoholics tend to seek their own level, just like water, you know. And all of a sudden, you start hanging around the ones who drink just like you do. And that way, you know, the book talks about that line in there where it says, you know, your way of life seems the only normal one. because you're only hanging around people like doing what you're doing. And then you tend to outdrink them, and you go to the next level. And everything seems to be congruent, because it's all, everybody's doing what you're doing. And, the other ones are just assholes. You just don't want to hang around them, and they're so picky. Anyway, so you got a bunch of people here, they're alcoholics, they're out there partying and dancing the night away, having a lot of fun and stuff. You got to slide a few Al-Anons in there to make sure they get them phone calls in the morning. Don't leave home. We used to have Carl Malden had an ad out there at one time with American Express. He used to say, American Express, don't leave home without it. We used to say, don't leave the hotel without me. It's like, bam. Everybody check, do a head count, and we're going. All right. And, so we're having fun, we're partying and stuff, and a few problems coming up, you're getting whatever, and your hygiene starts deteriorating at that point because you don't really have that time to shower quite as well as you should have in the morning, and all of a sudden the booze starts coming out of your system, and people are complaining about you, and so in the beginning I was drinking just to have fun, and then all of a sudden I'm drinking and all these problems that are starting to come up. And in my life I had a major crisis come up. My mom came down with terminal cancer when I was about the age of 26, and I took a leave from absence from the airlines, and I moved back home, and at that time I wanted to make my mom proud, so I went to work in sales, and I got a company card, an expense account, and all this wonderful stuff, and I was trying to make my folks proud, and my drinking took a whole nother twist and turn. I think what happened is I discovered happy hour, and of course I found the other alcoholic in the group, and that was the sales trainer, and we'd all get after work. There's 10 of us in this class. We'd all go down to Casa Maria or Tia Maria's, whatever it was, right after work, and we'd start having happy hour, and we'd have 3 or 4 drinks and whatever, and we'd have the little hors d'oeuvres and stuff, and after a couple hours, most people are getting up and going home to their wives and their loved ones and stuff, and he and I, we'd get up too, and we'd leave also with everybody saying good night, see you later. We'd head down to the next bar, and we'd start drinking there. Then about 11 o'clock, 11:30, he's getting up, he's got to go home to his wife and whatever, and I'd get up also, but then I would go to the next bar. And see, I was starting to drink myself into oblivion every night. The reality of what was happening is I was drinking myself into oblivion because I couldn't bear to go home and watch my mom deteriorate in front of my eyes. And I was creating my own illusion of life. I couldn't live life on life's terms at this point. And I got to tell you, it was a real tough time, whatever, but I did a lot of drinking. But before my mom passed away, we were able to sit down and go over our lives and talk about the good times and cry about the sad times and pretty much get current. Pretty much like an inventory, 5th step, 10th step, amends thing, where we're doing the 9th, where we're making direct amends on this. But unbeknownst to us, because we knew nothing about Alcoholics Anonymous, but my mom knew something insightful, and we sat down and talked about it. But before she was finished, she said, Tom, she says, I want you to watch your drinking. She says, you have alcoholism in your blood. It turns out I had a grandfather that had died of cirrhosis of the liver, and I have a couple uncles. One left a wife and 8 kids who'd never been seen since, and another was a merchant marine who never drew a sober breath in port. And she goes, and you're showing all the signs. Not a couple, not a few, but all the signs. And she said, so I just want you to watch your drinking over the years, And after she passed away, I got to tell you, I was never more enabled in my life. Everywhere I went, people were having drinks. Poor guy lost his mom, they had some beer in their fridge or vodka over here or something, and everybody was, poor guy lost his mom, here, have another drink type thing. And I can tell you I drank real hard and real long on that, and I like to make light of this in a certain sense because some people are going to be going through something, the similar thing. I want you to know that alcohol will not revive the dead, and it's certainly not a cure for cancer, especially in someone else. So if anybody's going through that, the drinking thing doesn't even make the mourning process go away. It just postpones it. So you're in oblivion for the night, but every time you come to or come semi-conscious, the grief is still there. So you end up having to go through that anyway. And, I hear a lot of excuses why people go out over the years and stuff, and don't let that be one of them, because it doesn't make anything go away. You just have to face it eventually and walk through it. And I had to do that when I got sober. And I know that, I started watching my drinking, and after she passed away, went back to the airlines, was flying around for a while, and the problems were getting worse and some of the stuff, but I would start watching my drinking. And I remember every night I'd go out to try to control my drinking, and I would be drinking orange juice and screwdrivers or something, and then I would switch just to straight orange juice because I didn't want anybody to know I really wasn't drinking, and I'd start switching it. But every time I was controlling and watching it and whatever else, there was absolutely no enjoyment. But every time I was enjoying, there was absolutely no control. I would go out there and drink to basically just light the night on fire, and it was fire for effect. we used to go out there and you know, it was working for a while, and then I had these problems I started drinking at, I was telling you, and then I started drinking at relationships when things weren't working out, and I go find, you know, next thing you know, you're drinking, and the problems started getting worse, and I finally got approached at work by one of the supervisors, because I was getting reported they were smelling way too much booze on me during the day, and they said, you know, it's really hard for somebody to admit when they're having, and he's fumbling around with these words, and I said, what, with drinking? I got a problem with drinking. He's like in shock because all the literature says, you know, it's a denial disease, you know, and here he says, yeah, I got a problem with that. And he's like, well, you want to do something about it? I said, well, sure, you know, and so they introduced me to special health services. I go down, I have this interview, and they give me one of them, I don't know how many questions it was at that time, 20 or 40 or 10 or whatever, and I'm filling out this thing, and she looks at this, and her eyes fall out and says, hey, you're an alcoholic. I said, screw you. I said, I answered everything there. Didn't you read the answers? See, my way of life only seemed the normal one, you know, and she's going, well, there is a test, and she did something that it was right out of the big book, and I didn't even know this. It says, you have a choice of what you want to do. We're going to do a little test, and you have to have 2 or 3 drinks. You get your choice what you want, 2 or 3, and then and you have to choose your booze of choice. And I said, well, I drink beer. And she said, well, how many you want? You want 2 or 3? I said, well, I'll go for 3. And then well, my first reaction was, well, I don't drink every day. She said, well, try. Well, okay, you know, and so I'm out there doing this thing, and that was another thing. You couldn't save them all up and have them on Fridays. My mind said beer, just, yeah, 3 cans of beer or whatever. I said, okay, cans Foster's. 8 ounce. Oh. And so I'm doing this thing, and I'm going around 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever, and I said, you know, I doing real good on this test, and I forgot to ask an important question. Called back up and said, by the way, I'm doing real good, no problems. How long did you want me to do this test? And I said, a year. Oh, you know, Bob and I talk about this thing about being a bad test day. This is a bad test year. You know, so I'm going on this thing, and I'm doing okay. So I'm committed to this. So I'm proving I'm not an alcoholic. And then, and I think it was shortly after 3 or 4 days, whatever, a major crisis came up in my life. Jimmy Carter won the election, and I went into a blackout that night. And the only reason I know I went into that blackout is because I got the telephone bill the next morning. Anybody have telephone lines? You call people in blackouts, you know, and all of a sudden, but you're not getting charged $1 a minute. You know, when you pass out on the phone, $80 phone bill, you know, I mean, oh my God. And so I went down there and I said, hey, I got this problem, and they, I guess I'm alcoholic. And they said, well, we have a choice. We have treatment programs. Okay, great. And they said, where would you like to go here? And at the time, I was based in New York or St. Louis. I can't remember where it was. But anyway, they were after me. And I said, no, I'll go to the one in California. Now, they have one in Laguna Beach, which is like right on the water. And I'm thinking, this is great. I'll bring my surfboard, do surfing in the morning. They had other plans. I ended up in the one in Santa Ana. And there's not a lot of good surfing in Santa Ana. Doesn't have a lot of good surf. Not a lot of room in that little place for the boards either. But so I'm doing this thing, and I'm going to whatever, and it's kind of, and I'm like 26 years old, probably one of the younger ones in the group in there. And I remember I'm going through there, and that's where I had some of my first introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous. Some guys from an H&I panel came in, and they were doing this thing, and God bless their souls. I don't think I heard a word they were saying, but, you know, it was real nice and whatever. And then we went out to a couple of the outside meetings, and I remember those were great, and I liked the outside meetings too. And I got back, and see, I was a real alcoholic, see. I wasn't a drug addict, you know, I had no problems in that area of my life, and so I continued to smoke pot and snort cocaine. And only on special occasions like Tuesdays, you know, and but I do know one thing, I know it's Alcoholics Anonymous, but if you snort a couple lines of cocaine and go to an AA meeting, and they ask for that burning desire, or, you know, your hand goes up. You want to tell them how wonderful this program is, and then, you know, and they're like, whoa, nothing from the neck up, please. You know, the old timers are looking at you, and of course they stop calling on you, and eventually, you know, I stopped going, and then I had another major crisis in my life. I was stood up on a date, and I did exactly what it said to do in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, unbeknownst to me, because first of all, I hadn't read the book, I hadn't taken any steps, because I hadn't got a sponsor, and it's really tough to do any of that stuff if you don't. And I remember I did exactly what it said. I stepped in the nearest bar and tried some controlled drinking this time. And now with all this newfound self-knowledge, I had 3 drinks or whatever, patted myself on the back, had a wonderful evening, and I remember the next morning thinking to myself, man, now you know. You know, you went out, you had the drinks, there was no problems, you weren't that bad yet, you hadn't had all those things happen that those folks did, and besides, if it ever gets really bad, you'll know where to go now, And I'm thinking to myself, I hadn't lost the house, I hadn't lost the job, and we were talking about that with the guy the other day, I lost a lot of other jobs, but not that one, because I got to tell you, in the airlines, they used to allow me to take a 9-month leave of absence during the winter season when it slowed down. So all of a sudden, my attendance would be really terrible. They're about ready to call me in and fire my ass, and then I'd take the 9-month leave. 9 months later, come back. I get a new supervisor, got some other stuff. We changed domiciles. Let's see. You pull up the attendance record. Didn't call in sick once for the last 9 months. That's great. Wasn't there. So I never got fired from that job. I got fired from bartending jobs and waiting tables, all these other things, but I didn't really count them. I would have quit anyway. I was going back to... Anyway, long story short, I'm back out there, and I'm patting myself on the back, and I have this newfound knowledge. I know what alcoholics are like. I went to the meetings, got the therapy thing, got all that stuff going good. And so I'm going to go out there and really control and enjoy my life here now, and I hit the races. And I spent the next 3 years of sheer hell fulfilling Chapter 3 in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Once again, unbeknownst to me, because I hadn't read the book, I hadn't got a sponsor, and it's really tough to work any steps if you don't do that. And by the end of my career there, I was 29 years old, and I had built this sandcastle of a life, and the tide was coming in. For a while there, I was showing up to work, and every time I showed up, they're short liquor or money. Go figure. So I put in for the job as the service manager who does all the counting of the booze and the money, and we didn't have any more problems. Immediately, anyway, except for one. See, I was now junior again in that group of people, so all of a sudden, the junior people, you couldn't pick your schedules anymore, so I was having to take these early morning flights that I hadn't done in years. And so here I'm supposed to show up at work at 6 and 7 in the morning, and if you're out till 2, 3, 4 in the morning drinking the way I drink, and that booze is shaking its way out of your system now, and my hands are rattling, and the problem was that the service manager had to pour coffee in first class on those china cups and the silver trays, and those things rattle. You're like, would you like a little more coffee here? And they're like, yes, please, over there. and we go, well, what's shaking more, me or the plane? We're still parked at the gate. We hadn't even left yet. And so what I have to do is I have to have 3 or 4 little vodkas, in the morning, to calm my nerves so I could get normal so I could go to work. Now, like I told you before, in the beginning I was drinking to have fun. Then I started drinking at problems. Now I've been drinking because I've been drinking. And the old Indian adage comes to mind where it says, the man takes a drink, then the drink takes a drink, and then the drink takes the man. And little did I know what was what or who was who. And now I'm in full of fear again, because you know what, you can get fired for drinking on the job, and that's my only source for my booze, And so here I am drinking at the fear, I'm drinking because of problems, I'm drinking because I've been drinking, and now it became a job, And so by the age of 29 years old, I came in here with alcoholic liver hepatitis, bleeding ulcers, and I was yellow as this guy's shirt over here from jaundice, That wasn't exactly a vision for you. And I ended up one more time knowing what I had to do, and so I made a New Year's resolution to get sober, and I like to tell everybody that I got sober on a New Year's resolution. My sobriety date is June 25th, 1984. What? I was getting around to it, I ended up doing all those things out there that they talked about. I didn't have the house and lose the house and stuff, but I started rolling the cars, and I hit a bridge with it. Bridges are really hard to miss. They're big, And, God, it was insane. I was making probably $35,000 a year at that time, and it was pretty good for those days, but, I'd written over $1,500 worth of bounce check charges that year. And because, I wasn't a real thief, I'm just a pilfer, and I'm not a real criminal. I wouldn't write those big bad checks, like $100. I would write the little ones, $10, $15, $20, and they would tag. Back then, they were only normally charging people $5 a bad check. I was getting $15, $20 bounce check charges because I did it so often. And if I just waited a week, I would have had enough money to do everything. But no, I was out at that bar every single night drinking, and I was doing whatever I had. I couldn't count, couldn't add. I probably only had about 2 or 3 flannel shirts and a couple of Levi's left in the closet because every time I go out to do laundry, I just drop it in the laundry, and then I'd step in the bar next door and start drinking. And then we'd go on to the next place, and I forget where all the stuff was, And this car had this bumper that was sticking out the back window. I was driving around for about 3 months because I was getting around to fixing it. I finally threw it in the backyard, but that's the one I hit the bridge with, I'd filled up the back seat there with these beer cans, because I drank and drove a lot. You get in real trouble for that shit. So I kept throwing the empties in the back seat, because then if I ever got pulled over, I wasn't driving with open containers. These are empty containers, and I was saving them for recycling purposes. It actually worked once in Missouri, and and one more time, like I said, the sandcastle of life, the tide was coming in, and I finally just gave up. And I remember what happened, the truth of the matter is I was getting in trouble more and more at work. Everything was about ready to cave in on me, and I thought, man, God, it was a bright sunny day, and I was full of fear, and I'm driving to work. I was hungover. I was probably a few minutes late behind, and my life is running in front of me and stuff, and I'm just full of all this anxiety and that. And I said, it was a bright sunny day because it was burning through my eyes, and I said, they said, hey, nobody gets sober on a bright sunny day, So I said, damn, what a great day to get sober. And I turned that car around, and I called special. I said, hey, I'm going to get sober. And they're like, who's this? I thought they knew, and they go, oh, Tom, how are you? Great, what time are you going in today? And I went, no, that's tomorrow. Because when I turned the car around, I said, what a better day to get drunk. I'll get sober tomorrow. And I did the last hurrah. I went out, I did the drinking thing, and I used to do, and I remember getting a case of beer and going over to friends. We did some water skiing. I went out and tried it one more time. I went out drinking and chasing around the clubs, and I went home alone one more time and just was looking there, and the last hurrah, And they said drink right up to the door, and I had a couple beers that I went right up to the door with, and I didn't even finish the second beer. I had one that morning, and that was it. And I checked into that treatment center. And I got to tell you, it was terrible in there because, all they talked about is they wanted to put me into these classes of therapeutic things like family dynamics of substance abuse. Well, I was alone. I was 29 years old. My family didn't have a problem with drinking. They didn't even have a problem with my drinking, They just had, they just didn't want me around when I was drinking, But the essence of what happened is that I ended up going through all this stuff, and all I wanted to do was go to meetings. They said, bring the body and the mind will follow, and I kept doing that. And they had panels that come in, but more importantly, I was trying to get out and stuff. And the panels would come in, and they shared, and it was really wonderful. And I got sober, and I got to tell you, I didn't do exactly everything right. I probably did things more wrong than I did right when I was new, but I did one thing, is I got lots and lots of AA meetings. They said if it wasn't an excuse not to go drinking, don't use it as an excuse not to go to AA meetings. And they said, practice the principles of your drinking and use it to this program, and you won't have any problem staying sober. Matter of fact, apply a quarter of the time you put into your drinking into Alcoholics Anonymous, and you will do just fine. And I was like, okay, so I kept coming to meetings and companies. But see, I worked in the airlines, and I couldn't get involved with AA that much because I never had a right schedule. Next month, we changed the schedules, different times, different days off, different whatever. And we float into different towns you never know you'd be. But every time I'd drive into a town, I always went to find a bar, so I always went to find a meeting. First thing they told me to do when you get into a town, pick up the phone and dial for information, ask for Alcoholics Anonymous, and find out where the meeting is. Over the years when I was doing that, I always maybe made it to my meeting on my own. Sometimes I didn't have to, but I always had a ride back home. Always somebody from Alcoholics Anonymous would take me back to the hotel. And I remember one time I flew into this one town, and I was into Kansas City, pick up the phone, Alcoholics Anonymous, yes, I'm going to be here for a little while, but I said, I'd like to know where the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting is. They go, where are you? I said, I'm at the hotel such and such. We'll be right down. I said, don't you want to know what I look like? No, we can tell. I was standing out there in front of the hotel, you know, looking around, whatever, and all of a sudden I'm looking at, I was hoping it was her, but anyway, somebody goes, Tom, I mean, what, I got AA stamped on my forehead or what, you know? Took me to the meeting, took me back. Those folks, I was temporary assigned there for 2 weeks in Kansas City, and they took me right under their wings and invited me into their homes, and it was just awesome, you know. And I got to tell you that moving forward a little bit here, I started making amends without consulting a sponsor, and I ran into a girl that I dated a year or two before, and that was a really bad experience, but anyway, so I wanted to make amends, and I said, I apologize for being such an asshole that night. I'd like to make it up to you. Will you go to have dinner with me again? And she said okay, and so we started dating and whatever else, and I proceeded to do like we do in AA. I turned my will and my life over to her, so I understood her, believing she too would restore me to sanity, and she lived in North Hollywood, California, right down here, and she was right around the corner from Chandler Lodge, if any of you are familiar with that. And it's right after the curve. And there was Harry Gregory had a place on the corner, and we lived right after that. And I was crawling distance from the meeting, so I'm coming out, flying out there, landing there. I'm going to the meeting, and you know, they're asking for visitors from out of town. My hand goes up. Hi, I'm Tom. I'm an alcoholic from St. Louis. You know, and they're raising their hand next day. But see, in the airlines, it's kind of like, you know, visitors are a little bit different. See, I would work my flights over here, so I'd lay over in Los Angeles, and then on my days off, I just hop on a plane and fly out for the days off. So I'm there 6-7 days a week, and after about a month, they're going, Tom, you're here more than the regulars. Put your hand down. You know, didn't know the rules that well, but you know, I just kept showing up, and then about a year and a half, you know, I ended up moving in with her. Things happened by miracles and whatever else and changes, and it had to be God's will. I got laid off in St. Louis, transferred to LA, and I'm there. And then we're about a year and a half sober, and I'm just going to lots of meetings. That's all I'm doing. I'm doing lots of meetings. I had a sponsor back in Missouri. Did some of the 4th and 5th steps while I was in the treatment center. Came out. Didn't do much step work after that, but I'm going to meetings. I'm going to meetings, going to meetings. And then all of a sudden, we went on strike. I lost the job. I had a bad week. Chandler thought it was funny. Scotty fell out of his chair thinking it was so hysterical. I lost the job I had on Monday. On Wednesday, I got a letter from the IRS on $2,800. On Friday, she threw me out. Couldn't be around this bum. And I'm pulling my hair out, trying to make the relationship work, going down the picket line, we're doing all this, and it's like, God, how can you forsaken me? You know, I got a good program. And, you know, and I'm going doing this stuff, and we're getting back and breaking up and going to this thing, and I'm just going insane, you know. And, you know, it's like, poor me, you know, and I'm just doing the meetings and stuff. And then all of a sudden, you know, they called the strike off, and I'd been replaced. And they're going, you know, getting hungry, find a job, jerk. And I said, I got one. They just don't let me go no more, you know. And people have been saying for 3 months, hey, you know, Harry needs some people at the construction company down there. Why don't you go wait tables? You know, they're looking for people at the Sportsman's Lodge on Ventura Boulevard. And I'm like, you know, all right, you know. So that day I end up going down and I get in the job, and I'm going to this, and I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm just going, this is insane, you know. But I remember going in there, and I'm still feeling sorry for myself. And I go to this one meeting, and here's this guy sharing. His name's Bill. He says, hi, my name's Bill. My life's absolutely perfect today. You know, having worked all 12 steps in entirety, I've never had it so good. And if you had a good program, you too could have it all. Matter of fact, my wife thinks I'm a super husband. The kids all love me, and I'm making. Matter of fact, my boss likes me so he gave me a raise, and I'm making more money than I ever made. And you had a good program, you too, and I'm ready to deck this sucker. And I probably would have if he wasn't sitting in that wheelchair. You know, and. You know, here's a guy doing that, as you know, rolling through life and, you know, do the legwork, you know. And so I got those jobs and I started showing up and doing that stuff. And I got hired both at the Sportsman's Lodge and that thing. And my life took a new change, you know. And I was working with Harry and I was helping out there as a laborer. And next thing you know, one thing changed from another, and I was assistant superintendent, then the superintendent on this job. And then one of the guys on another job dragged me by the shirt collar and hauled me down to the union hall at the Carpenters Union. Had signed me up for a journeyman carpenter. And he's going, you know, I would say, well, don't they have an apprenticeship thing or something like that? And he goes, shut up, you're too young, you're too old for that. And I was like, yeah, God, you know, what's that all about? You know, and so he goes, just suit up and show up. Here, read this book and call me if you got any questions. You know, I said, suit up and show up, read the book. Hey, you know Bill W? He said, who? I said, never mind. You know, and that little brain cell I hadn't fried come flickering back on and said, practice these principles in all your affairs. Now, looking back on there, I want to fast forward a little bit here. Just, you know, you could have never proven it to me in the moment. But that turned out to be the best week of my life. Because it was absolutely necessary that I lose that job, that relationship, and get into a financial situation where I was willing and able to change, to put me on the path that I'm on today and put me in front of you. What happened on that week was probably one of the worst things, but you have to think about it in terms of nature. Every spring and summer with the beautiful roses and stuff and flowers are out there is all preceded by a fall and a winter. And in the fall and the winter, the leaves start falling off, the branches get laden with ice, and they start breaking off and torn away to make room for new growth. And if you do the third step and you do it properly, unfortunately, God, I don't know how to do it other than that unconditional God help me. You know, when you start doing that stuff, all of a sudden God might make some changes in your life. And in the moment, it will be painful and look like you're losing everything, and you're like, what kind of a program is this? Oh, we're hitting the bonus program now here. And everything's being stripped away, but it's absolutely necessary to put you to where you're going to be in the future. Now, I like my friend Scotty Redmond. He used to talk about, if you just clued me in a little bit about why you were doing this, I wouldn't have said all those bad things about you, I have a couple other friends in the program that have experienced very much the similar stuff. But I got to tell you, what happened to me was the best thing in my life, is because it took me from being around the program to in the program. And what happened was all of a sudden my dance card opened up. Now I got into a job routine that was Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturdays and Sundays if I was lucky to get the overtime, but it was consistent and it was regular. And all of a sudden now I ran out and I got a new sponsor down here in North Hollywood. His name was Ron C. Ron was what I call my commitment sponsor. If you don't have one, folks, go get one. And that's somebody who runs around AA and volunteers you for everything that opens up. Any volunteers here? Yeah, Tom's going to do it right here. Next thing you know, I'm working as a secretary on one meeting. I got a convention committee where I'm helping out in the hospitality room at the Santa Fernanda Valley Convention. And I got a commitment to an H&I commitment, which was one of the sister groups of that, which is the Friends of Warm Springs. And they gave me that commitment on the second Sunday of each month. And I got to tell you, that was the worst Sunday to have, because it was on the day of every Super Bowl, Mother's Day, Christmas, you name it. I mean, it seemed like everything fell on that day. I got a holiday, yeah, I got to go to Warm Springs. It's like, and I hated that thing. I didn't like doing it, but it turned out that I've heard other speakers say this, and Clancy does a wonderful thing. It's like you're just so pissed and angry coming back of it, and then you're driving home in this wonderful glow, going, "Oh, there's no good to my there's no end to my goodness." As you're driving home, I'm thinking of all this stuff, but you just feel good. It's almost impossible for you to go out there and do some of this stuff and feel bad when you come back. Because all of a sudden you're getting out of yourself. And I thoroughly believe that that's one of the things that unlock the keys to the kingdom around here, is starting to put the needs of other people ahead of your own. I didn't have the message I didn't think, and I went. And I remember my first trip up to Warm Springs. Ron took me up there. And we're going up there, and it was just like 3 of us to do this panel, or 2 of us, or whatever else. And I got up there, I was scared. The room was filled like this with a bunch of guys, and they looked like most of them had been in prison. Most of them had the choice of going to prison or going to Warm Springs. Would you like to go to prison or rehab? I'll try rehab. They know what prison was like. They would try this. And they go, "You want the co-ed one up in Acton, or you want to go to Warm Springs?" "Oh, guys, I'll go to Acton." "No, sorry, it's full." Okay. So here the guys are. They're up there, and there's a few of them that are coming into the rooms and stuff. But I got up there and I started sharing a little bit about my spirit, strength, and hope. I was so nervous. I said about 3 things. The room fell out in laughter, and I sat down. He goes, "Keep going. What is it?" I was just sitting there. And as it turned out, then I kept going, and I finally got my story. And as it evolved and whatever else, I just got to go up there and share with these guys. And it's really touching. And I got to tell you, one of the marvelous things about it is you wonder, are any of these guys ever getting any of this? And sure enough, there'd be few people that would trickle down into Chandler Lodge, and they would stay there, and then they would go to the meetings. And I got to tell you, one of the funny things is, Ted and Fran and my wife and I were all going to Pacoima. We're going to breakfast at a nice little Mexican restaurant down there. And here's this guy all tatted up, looks like he's wearing colors and a bunch of other stuff. And he goes, "Hey, I know you." It's a pretty tough little neighborhood. I said, "Yeah." "Where do you know me from?" He goes, "You used to go to Warm Springs." I said, "I did. Were you ever in there?" "Yeah, I was in there about 14 years ago, man." I said, "Hey, did you stay sober?" He goes, "Oh, no, but man, you were funny." And the guy is sober today, but he had like 7 years or something like that. But you never know who you're going to touch or how you're going to touch him. And it's like, well, you get some, you lose some, And I got to tell you, you never know who you can touch. And moving around the country and stuff, and being over in Las Vegas now, we get people who've been through those programs, and sometimes you don't always touch the hearts of them. I loved Alcoholics Anonymous. I love my prison commitment. I got to tell you, I started off with warm springs. What do I got to share? I'm an ex-stewardess. I'm some candy asshole guy. And what do they want out of a guy like me? Besides that, Scotty. And and I'm thinking, what do I have to share with these guys that's going to be meaningful for them? And I'm thinking, I don't measure up, and I'm afraid, all this stuff. And I move up to, and they taught me in the beginning, never turn down an AA request. Never turn down an AA request. So I did a lot of stuff I didn't want to do, and I got to tell you, I've never regretted, and I've always felt so glad that I did that. Because I have a preconceived notion of what things are like and what they're not. And so I remember being up there, and just about 8, 9 years ago, I'm over at my home group up there at double digits on Friday nights, and all of a sudden, Richard comes in there and says, "Hey, Tom, would you like to go to prison on such and such with me? Or would you like a panel commitment?" And Ted and I had gone through and signed up for all the stuff, and I said, "No. When do I start?" And he said, "Oh, good. Can you take the second Fridays of every month?" Friday nights, that's my home group meeting, I got commitments there, but somebody else already got the coffee this month, so, okay, so I started taking this thing, and then I remember I got the list of all the people who are qualified to go into prison, and I started going down the list, and going down the list, and going down the list, and nobody could make it, finally, so I ended up having to go on the panel myself that time. And what I ended up doing is, I ended up going through it, and I'm scared. I've never been to prison. I've never had doors locked behind. I've never even been to jail. I haven't even been in a drunk tank. I haven't been in the back seat of a cop's car except for on a ride-along. I'm going, oh man. So I'm going through there. The guards take your license, all this stuff. You're rimming all this stuff. Don't talk to this, keep it. And then think, oh my God, these tough guys are coming across the yard and this and that. I'm going to be, oh man, if God, you're going to be with me or I'm screwed. And I mean literally. And so I get through there, and they open the thing, and I got to go to the educational center across the yard. And you got to go across the commissary, too. They have the little kitchen area there. And so I get there, I open the door, and I'm finally walking out, going through another gate and whatever, and I'm out on the yard, and I'm walking across, and I'm just keeping my head down a little bit, whatever else. And they rang the dinner bell. And now I got to go through 300 guys. I'm like, oh, this is not good, And I get in there, and so I walked in that meeting. I'm scared to death. It's only me, and I got an hour to share a little bit with these guys. And so I just tell them what I'm thinking and feeling. What you see is what you get from me today. And I start telling them about how afraid I am and how I was going to bring a Frisbee and throw it down the back of my pants just in case any of you guys try anything, And they're laughing. They're falling out of the things or whatever else, And I got to tell you what involved in that. Now, I had all these fears enough, and everybody at the end of it, they walked me back all the way down there, and just, okay, Tom, you'll be fine, And I started doing that thing, and that was a little over 8 years ago. And I got to tell you, it is the highlight of my week most of the time. When I say the week, because I only had the second Friday or the third Friday or whatever it was, and all of a sudden, I got a couple of guys hooked into it, and I got Jim Hilger come up, Jim H, and I ended up getting another guy, Peter S, that I have, and I got those guys, and I just took them every week. And all of a sudden, they came to Peter one night when I was out of town doing something, and they said, "Hey, we want to do a book study up here, and we need a host." And he's looking around, he's the only one that night again, so he said, "Yeah, we'll do that." And so he signed us up for Tuesday night. I said, "Good for you. That's a great commitment. Congratulations." And then about a week and a half later, whatever else, he broke his foot. And, Tom, I got to go up in this wheelchair. Can you push me up? And, yeah, okay, And I end up doing it every Tuesday. And we kind of modeled a little bit after Bob's and a little bit about some of the other guys. And we started taking a book study in there. We read a little bit and we share experience, strength, and we try to keep our opinions out of it, but some of us just can't help ourselves, So we do a lot of stuff like, these are the good meetings and these aren't. Stay away from this group and don't hang out with them. And, that's what we're like. Alcoholics are like that. And at least this one is. I don't know. Maybe your home group doesn't do that, but I do. And I got to tell you, it has brightened my day. Now, I got to tell you something strange has been happening up there. We used to go up there, and we got a couple guys. Mike T. come down, and we had Benson. He came down, and a few other guys that have been in the prison who got down there and stuff. And we started doing this thing, and I got Mark C. started coming down from the hood. He's been sober 7 years and out on the streets with us. And all of a sudden, we started getting a whole bunch of them. We probably have about 10 guys in our home group and civic group who are guys in prison. Are out there today doing the deal. They're taking commitments and they're staying sober. And I look back on my life and I say, I've gotten a commitment, and I was going to do Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember I'd been trying for a long time to get this thing, and I couldn't. I finally gave up and said, I'm going to do this for life. I'm not drinking again. And I'm going to work it one day at a time. And I don't turn down those requests, and I don't put anything out in my life more important than Alcoholics Anonymous. And I can tell you it's really a difficult thing to do. You know, because we get busy. You know, you get sober, you stop drinking, and you get a life. And that's a two-edged sword. Patio says it from down in Laguna. Don't let the gifts of the program drive you out. All of a sudden our dance cards get full. We start doing this, and the first thing we want to cut out of Alcoholics Anonymous is the very things that gave us all those gifts. You know, we get the families and the children, and my God, they need attention too. But don't cut out your AA. It is a small price to pay to put that hour in the day. And when I look back on my life, I see, how can I ever repay that gift of a second chance at life? And it's by doing the things you don't want to do. They told me around AA, it's not what you volunteer for around here. It's for what you don't turn down that counts. And I got to tell you, these are the things that you're going to do. You're going to be inconvenienced and whatever. If you read in the 12 and 12, or even in the chapter Carrying the Message, you know, in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, you're going to be faced with stuff of having people in your house. You might even have to fight them once in a while. They're going to throw up in your car. They're going to do all this stuff. But the things you won't want to miss, you know, and you're like, oh yeah, that's what I want to sign up for, yeah. And you know, what I got to tell you, that's one of the gifts of this program. It's turned out, man, you can't express it. And one of the things I've always been frustrated over the years is I've always wanted to try to inflict people and pass on my enthusiasm and love for this thing. And I want to just say to some people, you just don't get it. You know, the root of our problem is selfishness, self-centeredness. So the solution is constant thought of others. And nothing will ensure that sobriety more than constant working with these folks. Any problem you got, it says sexual problems. What's the solution? Work with new people. What? Guys, work with other people. Constant thought of others. This is what's going to, that imperious herb will be quieted by working with other people. My God, how did, you know, that's Greek. It doesn't work. You want to do this? I want door number 3. And they're going, no, you got to go A, B, and C. You know, it doesn't work. It just doesn't make sense to me. I got to tell you that I started doing these things, and I've thrown myself into Alcoholics Anonymous as much as I can, and I just don't turn down the AA requests. I have now I'm recently was transferred out to a place where I'm working in Panama City Beach, Florida. I go to meetings there, and I'm working with a lot of Hispanic people from Guatemala, from Honduras, from Mexico, and I've always been threatening to do a little bit of learning Spanish fluently, and it was part of one of my inventory things. I used to help people get here, or help people here get around here, and anyway, long story short is somebody told me I got to learn how to speak Spanish fluently and help these folks. So I'm getting the nerve to go. I started going to Spanish-speaking meetings. And I'm thinking, man, they're not going to like this gringo. It's kind of like going to prison. You know, oh, man, you're thinking he can't speak the language very good and all this other stuff. And man, it's going to be terrible. And so I'm building up the nerve to go to this meeting so I can go in there and say, me amo Tomás, yo soy alcohólico. And I finally get the nerve. I go to the meeting, and there's one guy. And he's on the phone to his sponsor. And he'd been sitting there 3 weeks. So my preconceived notions rob me and other people of opportunities. You never know when you're going to be given the opportunity to help somebody. You know, so I'm going to probably end with a couple of things here, but I want you to know that if you're not involved with H&I, there's a counter out there that I want you to go down and sign up. Find out what you got to do. First, go in as a visitor, go along on a panel, Go down to one of these institutions. My favorite ones are not the nut wards, even though you get a lot of heads smiling. I like the ones like the civil brands that you can go to in the Warm Springs and Acton and a few of the other places. Acton will be, the ladies are just wonderful right up the road here. But I got to tell you, one of the best experiences, like I said, I started volunteering for all this stuff, and Ron had run around me and volunteered me for everything. And I'm doing these things, and now I'm hanging out with a bunch of my buddies from down there at Chandler Lodge, a bunch of the 5th chapter, and the tribe, and a few other groups that were active that day. So I'm meeting a bunch of my biker buddies up at Warm Springs, and I'm riding along, and as I'm going there, you know, they had a little ride that I'm driving in my car. They're meeting me up on the bikes that day, and I'm riding along, and I'm listening to the old parts music now. I'm listening to Coast 103, the mellow songs along the coast, you know, and I'm kicking along, speeding, you know, like usual, and they had an ad on the ride that ad came out on the radio for a new ride they just put in Magic Mountain, and it was called Ninja. It was the Black Belt of roller coasters, and the ad went something like this. Ninja, the Black Belt of roller coasters. You can't see the track. You never know when the next turn's coming. You'll never know when they'll throw a loop in there. And I said, my God, that's his program. And I'm cruising along there, and of course you're feeling good. You're getting your health back in 30, 60, 90 days, and the train's going up faster and faster, and you're getting up on the top of the hill, and some old fart taps you and says, hey, buddy, read the book. You shut up back there. I got a good program. Check it out. You know, and you just love and sobriety. And all of a sudden it goes, and it's going down faster and faster. And you go, what's going on here? He said, work the steps. You know, man, back there. And all of a sudden it goes right, and she went left. Felt like she just tore your heart out. And you go, my God, what's going on here? And you're going, read the book. You go, I think I lost it on the last turn. And there goes a loop, and there goes your job out the window. You go, my God, what's happening? Just hang in there, folks, because the line got longer, and the price of the ticket went up. So just hang in there, because eventually it's going to ride around longer and longer, and it'll smooth out. Eventually you're going to lose another job and another one, and all of a sudden you're throwing your hands up like the rest of them. Oh, here we go again. You know? But hang in there, folks, and eventually somebody's going to sit down in front of you, and you know what you're going to do? You're going to grab them and say, hey, buddy, read the book and work the steps. Thanks for letting me share, folks.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. And let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.